But again, welcome to the Royal Oak Historical Association. Today, we're so fortunate we have two great guests, good friends, and they'll tell you so much stuff about Elk Lake, Port Alberni, going to car shows all over the country with Model A's, Model B engines, and so on. Don and Norrie Spencer. Norrie's on my left, and Don's on right. So, what I want to talk about with these guys is how old are they? What year was Don? What year were you born, Don?
41.
Okay, and where were you born?
Jubilee Hospital.
Perfect. Same for me.
And my wife was too.
Perfect. I like it. And I know exactly how. Well, Norrie is. Tell me how old you are, Norrie.
I'm 83.
83. Guess. Yeah. Okay. Well, 83 is a tough age. When you hit 80, it's really a tough age. But the real reason we have them here is that they have so much information about everything, and they've recorded it. I've been going through all their paperwork for the last week or so, driving them crazy. They say, I'll be there, and then I'm not there, and then I get taken over here, taken over there. So there's boards behind you, or behind them, and if you can view them, I don't know if you can pick it up exactly, but we'll start off by basically talking with Norrie, because right now I helped him the other day. He's got a black 32 Ford. So tell us more about your car, Norrie.
A 32 Ford. Yeah, I bought that in 1994 in Atlanta, Georgia. And Pat Hoole is here today. We went back and got it in the end of May that year. And it was all in pieces, and there's lots of little stories about that car, but it's all restored now, and it's been a National Point winner with the Vintage Car Club of Canada. And it's been invited down to shows all over the West here, including going to the 80th anniversary tour, 2012, in LA at the Peterson Museum, by invitation.
Perfect. I know there's another little story in the back when you and Pat went down. Pat Hoole, you went in Pat's truck and trailer, and I think they ate at McDonald's all the way down. They had salads. I'm not sure. There's lots of stories. The story that to me it was so funny that Pat told me, they're putting it together so they can get it on the trailer, so they can safely carry it up back here. And Pat's putting the hinges for the trunk on the car. And the guy that sold it, his wife comes up and goes, "What are you doing?" Oh, Pat's he took them off one, I think, once, so I put one other. "What did you do that for?" He said, "Well, they're on the wrong side." "You mean that thing will fit if you do that?" We would have never sold it. And so he was so fortunate to get, this is a fantastic car, as you can see in the pictures. It's got different wheels on it now, but that's how it came when they brought it back. Okay, Don. Well, let's see. I've had fun with Don the last day or so, because if you look at Paige, now does anybody remember Paige the cleaner, Ron Page? We all took her clothes there, I'm sure. Don, tell us how that happened and how did we get to Joe Taylor, if you remember rightly?
Well, it was kind of an interesting story to it. I was working in the dockyard at the time on my apprenticeship. And going to the dockyard, I blew the engine up in my old 47 Chev. And Gary says, "Oh, we'll take the wrecker and we'll find an engine to replace it." So we were going to an auto wreckers, and Gary gets the call that there's an accident on the Pat Bay Highway at Island View Beach, or Island View Road. Right. And so we went there and had to deal with this accident, and it was Dave Hancock's father, Fred, that was driving the Page the cleaner's truck. And he was quite badly injured. Yeah. And that's where the picture came from, and it was from the Times or the Colonist. I can't remember. They were split then. Yeah. And the fellow that's at the front of the truck there with the beard, that's me.
You'd never know it. I've asked 3 or 4 people when I brought them home to kind of sort them out. And then, "Who's this?" And they go, "I don't know." They don't know who Page the cleaner is. If they're younger, no idea.
Anyway, when I was at the dockyard, we used to call it the dockyard flu. You needed a couple of days off. You would, because you didn't need a doctor's certificate. Right. And so that's when I was looking for this engine. Well, guess whose picture is on the front page of the newspaper? So that's where that picture came from.
Beautiful picture. Just to extend a little bit more on Fred Hancock, he was our basketball coach when we played basketball at Sanderson. We used to ride around, not that truck, out to Souk in the snow, and it was just, we in the back with all the dry cleaning coming or going. But if you're a reader and you've heard of Hancock House on the mainland, that's Dave Hancock. That's his son. We all went to school with Dave and played basketball with him. Okay, Norrie, back to Norrie for a minute. How many, well, let's not go. What did you do when you were on the top of the hill there overlooking out Lake, Piedmont, Santa Clara? What happened up there? What fun things did you do with the kids in the neighborhood? And who were they? You remember them all?
No.
Who was the biggest?
It was Fred Green that's in the back there today, and his brother John and Helen, that family, and my dad used to work with their dad.
Yeah.
And there was Jack Mather, and down on the highway a little bit, and there was Gary Cunningham down on the highway. And we used to have birthday parties when we were 3 and 4 years of age. And then later on, we played trains. And I brought one of the early locomotives I have. It's an S-gauge American Flyer that our uncle sent us up from Memphis, Tennessee, in about 1946 or 47. And it's a running engine still today. And Gary had Lionel, and so did Jack, I think. And so we would play trains as young kids here. Yeah. And of course, we worked on Harold Green's farm, Don and I and others, and Fred was there, and John Green. We worked there in the summers, doing hay and silage and all those kind of things.
Yeah. How was Fred as a truck driver on a hay truck? I heard he had some pretty scary times sometimes.
No, I don't remember that. All I can remember about the trucks is taking the old, I think it was the 42 Ford truck. Well, the second one was 42. I think one of them, anyways, it had to be the 42 because the other one had mechanical brakes. But we'd have to stop at Cunningham's garage every time we went out to where Wendy Fox has the Silver Wheel, where they sell the corn right now. Harold Green owned a piece there, and we'd take the cows out there, and we cut the hay out there and so on. So every time we went by Cunningham's, we had to get the brake fluid topped up.
That's a great story. Thanks. That's good. Thanks, Norrie. Don. Okay. What can we do with Don?
I should mention about those early years.
Yeah, by all means.
Fred was a mean guy with a lacrosse stick.
Really?
Yeah. We used to have a basketball hoop and set up with 2 poles supporting the backboard, and we put a net in it, and that was our goal for the lacrosse. And he would swing a mean stick, I can tell you.
That's great. That's great. Anything more you can tell about Fred? There's got to be lots of stories about him. What did he end up doing? Do you remember what he ended up? Was he a lawyer or something?
No, well, he was a lawyer, and then he became a judge. Yeah. And he told me on one case that this fella had done some infraction. I believe it was up in Nanaimo. Fred, you can correct me on this. But Fred sent him to jail for 7 days, and he said to Fred, "Yeah, I think that's reasonable, Sonny." and so Fred ever after that has had a beard. Yeah. So he looks older.
Great. Anything come to mind quickly about the trains that you want to go into a little bit more? How far you're into trains? I mean, people don't know that.
I've still got trains. I made up over the last few years, after I retired, I think it was either 14 or 15 complete sets to give my grandkids and their kids, and so on. So 14 train sets were picked up at auctions, this, that, and the other thing. I still probably got about 40 engines and about 200 rolling stock.
He's being a little bit modest on his ability to do what he does with trains. I've been up in his little space up there above the garage, and I'm going, I'm shaking my head, all this stuff. Well, I can, you just fix that. And you fix, can you? Oh, yeah, I can fix it. I got test benches, I can do that. So he does this all the time. That keeps him busy. And I'm going like, how in the heck does he do that? It's an amazing.
I'm probably one of the last people around the coast here that can fix the smokers in the engines.
Yes. Was that the one you had smoking the other day?
Yeah, well, one of them.
Yeah, that's really kind of cool. Okay, what other kids did you have great times with, Don, up there? Anybody come to mind quickly or no?
No, Jack Mather.
Yeah, what happened with Jack?
Oh, can't recall really.
sister? Did you know he had a sister?
Yeah, his sister's here today.
Is she? What was
Yeah,
her name?
in the back row there, sitting next to Fred.
Yeah.
And I believe, I was just going to mention that they're cousins. Their mothers were sisters, I believe.
Yeah,
So, yeah, that was, we had some great times.
yeah, good.
And of course, we spent a lot of time down at the Cunningham garage or up in behind it, because Cunninghams were the first people to have a TV in the whole area, and so it was a big magnet for the kids.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what Nels Grenwell said too, and Nels Grenwell ended up at the University of Victoria. He's since passed, but I was at a function and he came and he was a speaker and he thought I was sitting in the crowd, and he goes, points to me and he goes, I couldn't speak English when I came here, but when I watched television at Cunningham's and watched the cartoons, I learned to speak English. That was Nels Grenwell. Yeah. Okay. You can see on the wall, as they say on the posters, some amazing stories. The one I was amazed with the other night was this guy in a little speedboat down at, I think, Cutover Bay.
Elk Lake.
Oh, Elk Lake. Don knows a little bit about this guy. Maybe you could tell him, how did that boat come about?
Interesting. I was taking a course, well, I guess I should put it in perspective. I took 2 years for grade 10.
Yeah.
And so Carl Bunnell was my mentor. He was my woodwork teacher. And this would not happen anyway today, but he let me build that little boat at home, and he would come and inspect my work.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
great.
So
Yeah.
you wouldn't have that happen today.
No, no. Since you're on boats, you can see Kitimat above the larger boat. Now, that is absolutely an amazing story. You can barely read it because, of course, it's worded, but I'm sure Don could enlighten us on how amazing that boat was.
Well, Kitimat's on Douglas Channel, and many, many people had boats up there. And so I thought, well, I'll teach the kids how to build boats. And so that's one of the ones we built, and then I think we raffled it or sold it off. I can't remember how we disposed of it.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it turned out well. It was 17-foot Brandlmeyer.
Yes, my father-in-law built Brandlmeyers, built tons of them. Just for a minute, with how he's teaching kids, and we talked about this the other day. Don apprenticed at the dockyard as a shipwright, and then he's in his space in life, he said, and I'm going, what am I going to do? Am I going to stay as a shipwright, stay in the dockyard, or my brother's an industrial arts teacher? So he said, I just took a coin, and what did you do?
I flipped a coin whether I went back to school or went around the world on a trip, and I ended up going back to school.
That's how that boat came. Again, you'd never see a boat like that, would you, in the school system today being built?
Well, when I moved down here, thanks to Joe Lott hiring me at Parkland, we got into doing a lot of fiberglass, and Joe facilitated the school buying a automotive spray booth so we could do fiberglass layup in it. And we did dinghies, sailing dinghies, and the last major thing that we did was single rowing shells.
Oh, good.
And they were 23 feet long and about this wide.
Wow. And if you look at, in the same photograph to the right, are dune buggies. No, they're Volks. Yeah, but how did the dune buggies come about? You build, I guess, with the fiberglass.
Yeah, that was up in Kitimat, and my department head was John Smith, and he went through the industrial ed course with Norrie, and so we sort of had a connection there. And,
Right?
yeah, and those dune buggies, we sure had a lot of fun with those.
But you said boats again, and you're sitting beside, what did the kids call Norrie at school, and certainly around there? What was his name?
Gosh, you got me there.
Okay. What did you have? You used to carry a kit.
That was when I was heading to my suitcase and down at Elk Lake with the rowing club from Claremont, or in the intercity rowing, and so I was managing the Claremont team, and so I fixed these boats. So they used to call me the boat doctor. And we built several boats, about 15 boats, quite a few Brandlmeyers at Claremont when I was there in the wood shop too. And it's interesting that one of the big lights in the automobile, vintage car clubs of Canada is John Carlson. John Carlson actually raced V8 60s with a the 135 class on Elk Lake. And he actually beat Bill Muncie one race out there when we were kids.
You all know Bill Muncie, I hope. I mean, if you know hydroplanes, you should know Bill
Hydroplanes
Muncie.
in Seattle. And so John, I was actually talking to him about a month ago on the phone, and he's 2 months younger than me.
Really?
Yeah.
One question I was thinking about last night, and I wrote it down, my wife said, "Were you going to ask that?" I go, "Yeah, that's a question." I want to ask is, how did your students react to both of you in the shop or in the industrial art class? Like, because you can relate to people so well, and I just wondered, how did they react back to you? Were they happy, unhappy? I mean, we all have had experiences with teachers in school, and it didn't go well for some of us. And how did it go for you guys?
Well, I have lots of kids come up to me and thank me for putting them on the way, and I've got guys that are foremen and stuff in building today, still today, and so you know, we were quite involved with it. I was involved with building the curbing and so on for the racetrack at Claremont, and the kids all worked, my shop kids, pounding with 12-pound sledgehammers, posts in the ground and hard ground there and so on. So they related to me. But every time I used to go in, that's what I remember, into Butchart Gardens a couple of years ago, he's now retired, I'd hear this fellow from somewhere up on a roof or somewhere on a building, "Hi, Mr. Spencer." And we had his sister here a couple of years ago here talking to us, and that's Reggie Underwood.
Yeah. I'm just going to mention that a gal I went to visit last night, good friends of my parents, and Vivian Underwood sitting in the audience, and I just knocked on the door, "Hey," and somebody said, what do you want? And I'm downstairs. I said, "Tell Vivian Gary Cunningham's here." She said, the door opens. "Come on in here." So up I go, and I'm here to ask you to come to this event today, because Norrie said to me, Vivian Underwood, when she spoke, which was here, and it's channeled on Shaw, and it's accepted really, really well. And I said, "Just come and support him." She said, "Sure." Said, "Apparently you used to keep track of all his records when you were at Mount Newton, when Norrie was teaching."
No, I was at Claremont.
Was it Claremont?
When
But
she came up.
kept all the records. Sorry, Vivian, I said Mount Newton. That really confused her. She said, "I never went there." But anyways, she's here today, and I'm really glad she is.
Yeah, she did my register for attendance.
Yeah, that's what it was. I know.
On the stage, right? On the stage.
Come on.
One of the things that we haven't mentioned, we do have a younger brother, Jerry.
Yes, Gerald. Yes, we do.
And he likes to be called Jerry. He's back in Alberta, and he's got no inclination to coming back out here.
Okay.
I don't know what the story is there, but yeah.
I really didn't really know the guy that well, but I did have a chance to meet him when he bought a Ford with a flathead in it, and the motor was no good. And not whether you guys said that, we were going to get a motor for my brother. I said, yeah. Well, no, and I took out of my car, it's in the back, and it runs fine. So they come and got it, and they phoned me and said, "It's not that great, won't start." I said, "Well, did you put the distributor in right?" "No, well, we think so." So anyway, I go up, put the distributor in right, starts up. He said, "Oh, thank you, it's great." And I don't know how long he drove it. Do you remember doing that? No? Okay.
Okay, going back to Jerry, our younger brother, the year Don came back to school for senior matric at Claremont, there's 3 Spencers in the school.
Wow.
Don was taking senior matric, and Jerry was in grade 12, and I was teaching. All 3 of us were there.
Bob Kello was the janitor up there. Many of you, well, being of legal age, there was 2 or 3 of us. And Bob would take us in the janitor's room, and out would come a bottle of Southern Comfort.
But just to go back to Jerry before we leave him, because I don't think we're going to talk too much about him. Jerry left, last time Jerry, I think, was in here for any time, he was, after he'd been to England, he came back and he was going back to get married to a girl he met on the boat going to England. But he was working on my house in Broadmead when I was building it. And then he went back to SAIT, Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, and then up to the University of Calgary and became an engineer. And he was in the gas industry. He got up near the end with Gulf to, I think he was either 5th or 6th from the top. and the outfit from Texas came and bought them out. So Jerry got bought out golf, and so Jerry had to lay off all these guys that he'd hired, and then he went to his boss and asked for a golden handshake.
He did, he left.
And so he left too, and he got a 10-year pension plus at a full engineer salary.
Well, good for him. I neglect to ask about him because I really didn't know him. And when I was going through this, I saw his, oh, there he is. Well,
We all had Model A's up until just lately.
Yeah, I know. You get well. There's two stories there. This one here. I explained this to my wife before, and I heard this story a few years ago from Norrie. He was probably so techie that he was so far ahead of his time. Good friend of his said he was way ahead of his time. So he told me he went on a course to Redmond, Washington. I think he was Microsoft, maybe.
I was down with Called Apple, which was a program trying to develop software.
Who were the two guys sitting in the same classroom on left and right of you?
Well, one guy was, the guy I went down there with was John Ellis, but the other guy was Bill Gates. And
the other guy?
Well, that was later.
Oh, later.
Bill Gates was, at that time, still going to school before he made all his money. But the other fellow you're talking about was, I went down with that same group a year or two later to Apple Computers in Cupertino and took a 3-day course on introduction to Apple II+s and E's, Apple Macintoshes and stuff. And the guy that came in the first day I was on this course was Jobs, and so that was when he had just taken over that company.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so he talked to me for a little while, but so I ended up taking in 3 days 2 courses. They were so well organized in those days, ahead of everybody. You just go and get a box of tools. You got something to fix, and you'd get a video, and you'd go and follow the video, and the book would be there, so you could repair stuff right there. It was amazing how far ahead they were, and that's why Apple got ahead at the time.
Well, that's what you can do with YouTube now.
Oh, yes, you're right. You're right. And some of us aren't techy enough yet to do
This
that.
is back in the 70s, though.
Yeah, that's a long time ago now. I know. So, I was just knocked over by that. Where did your parents first live when they came to Victoria?
On Piedmont, on the road up from the highway. I'm not sure we got a picture, do we?
It was on the south side of Piedmont from the highway right up to Santa Clara.
Right, going up to Santa. Is everybody, I'm sure, reasonably familiar with
And
that.
they were on well water at that time, and then before they left that property, the Sayward Piercy group, which was a subdivision from Halliburton, I don't know where it went to. Fred probably knows more about that than I do. And they put a water system that went down Santa Clara, so Dad had to get a pipe all the way from Santa Clara down to the house, which was down near the bottom. Right. And
I know. They're just, Jack Mather often calls the lifetime at Elk Lake was the best. And he often refers to Mrs. Polly Blank, that and sold bread in a little stand down on the bottom, on the East Saanich Road, which is still part of the Pat Bay Highway.
Dad first came there, when they first moved there in 1934, he raised chickens, and the chickens, he kept the eggs and fertilized eggs, so he would sell day-old chicks back in like 38, 39, and all you could get was a penny a chick. So he got out of that business.
He didn't stay there. No,
but somewhere in the collection here, there's some paperwork from the old Saanich Fruit Growers Association. And I think there was a couple of pages here of the shipping from the Santa Clara, or the Piedmont house to the old fruit shed.
Tell them where the fruit shed was.
The bottom of Halliburton. And the fellow that ran it lived not far from who was I talking to here tonight?
Peter?
No, Joan, not far from Minter's place. Between Minter's and where Don's wife Evelyn lived.
You didn't mention the Minters. I'm sure you were, everybody knew the Minters. I mean,
Yeah, well,
on.
the Minters, I can remember they came in 1946, I think, and there was, 8 kids?
Yeah.
And the whole population of Royal Oak School, and that was the old schools, just mushroomed.
I know. I'm just thinking now as you're carrying on with that conversation, if you kind of think where the rowing club is today and Elks Park, and I remember my father playing baseball and all the guys, and we were too young at that time. But then the story comes up toward the highway, and I'm just going to kind of dwell in with Don. So what's your connection to the building coming up from the Elks Park that was a business?
It
Can
was
you tell?
the Eagles Park.
Yeah, Eagles. Okay, what about the building on the corner? Had a home gas pump there.
Oh, that was the Black Swan, and my in-laws purchased that. And I don't know if Fred's younger brother, John, and my mother-in-law, they had quite a relationship because John always used to go down there and get his gas. He didn't go to Cunningham.
No, he didn't. No. Fred did, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what connection did you have with the owners of the Black Swan? Did you know anybody there? Did you meet anybody there?
Well, I guess it was in the summer. My wife Evelyn's sister was down at the beach with me, and Marlene, she dared me to throw her sister in the lake. And that's how I met my future wife.
So when I said to somebody here earlier that Don Spencer was kind of a wild and crazy guy at one time, they go, really? And I go, well, there, he throws women in the lake, so, you know, right away. But how long have you been married?
55 years.
5? Children?
2.
2?
Yeah,
Okay.
Jennifer and Denise.
Good deal. Okay, let's stay with the kids for a second. There's a beautiful car in the background on Don's section. He said to me not too long ago, I'm going to sell it. I say, oh, okay. He's had it since he was this big. But there's a problem. I said, what's the problem? Tell him what the problem was.
Well, I wasn't going to be selling the car. It wasn't for sale.
Okay.
And this fellow approached me, and the story he gave me, well, there was 2 brothers actually, approached me. And the story they said was they wanted a 28 Model A rumble seat roadster for their dad's 90th birthday, because their dad's first car was a 28 rumble seat roadster. And my wife has been at me for I don't know how many years now to downsize. And so I named my price and they said, okay. So I sold it, but that wasn't the end of the story. My daughter just blew a tantrum, my youngest daughter, because she wanted that car. And she didn't speak to me for almost a year. But we are speaking again now. And I promised her that my 2 daughters can fight over the Mustang that I still have.
You still have, great. And while we're on the car with Don, he had a picture in his collection of an old car in the forest, and well, that's kind of a cool looking car for photographs. Can you tell me anything about it? And Norrie's, well, which story can you both tell about that old car in the bush?
Well, I think it was in Pat Hoole's yard. You have to get Pat to
Pat
have a look.
doesn't know it.
Oh, he doesn't
He's
know?
looked at it, and he said,
It's a great photograph, though. You know, it really is.
what year is that, Pat? What year is that picture of the Willie's Night? 1930. Yeah, it is a Willie's Night.
It is a Willie's Night. Wow.
Yeah. Pat, how many Willie's Nights have you got?
Don't ask me that.
No, when we get up to our age bracket and we've all got cars, it's time to go, and it's not always the best. Okay, I'm getting a notion we got time, but the Peninsula Basketball League, when we were at Don's getting this stuff sorted out, we had it everywhere. He takes it out and he goes, "Do you see this?" I go, "Oh yeah, I remember that." And so I'm not going to tell you. You tell me what happened.
Well, they needed a coach for one of the, I think it was 12-year-old girls at Cordova Bay, and your mother twisted my arm to coach.
And so Don became the basketball coach. So this is what these guys do. They just pick up the ball and start bouncing it down the street. Norrie, how much more do you want to go? 5? 5 minutes? The photographs, well no, let's leave the photographs for a moment. Up on the top right-hand corner by the Royal Oak crest, there's a little business card that somebody makes frames and bits and pieces for old cars out of wood, because nobody can do that. Who does that? See that yellow card? Yeah, they make wooden frames for inside of cars. All the wood.
Oh, that's me, yeah.
Yeah, that's you, right. But he's got an interest, he's got the whole family in the name. And because he won't say, I mean, how difficult this is. I can't do anything close to what he can do. But he doesn't, it's just another piece of wood. And he makes kits for guys from all over the country. They've given them what they have, what they need, how big, and he makes a kit.
Well, okay, now I'm on your same wavelength. That 5R Enterprises I'm Rollo, and then my wife's Rosalind, and we got Ryan, Ross, and Robin, our kids. So there's 5 Rs. So I built a total kit for the same as in my AA truck, which we'll get to it, I guess, another day. But there's pictures on the board of it. And I made this, we were on the Cross Canada tour, we were in Newfoundland, 1980, and this fellow followed me all along. Every time we stopped, he'd be measuring stuff on my truck and so on in Newfoundland. And so he said he had one, so he was working on it. So he phoned me and asked me to build him a wood kit for it. So I built him a full wood kit for this truck cab for a 3031 Ford Model A. And I went to ship the box full of part of all this wood. And it was an old place down there that by the McLaren's Lighting there that used to have a trucking firm in there that used to ship stuff across Canada and everywhere. So I went in there to ship this box of wood to Newfoundland. And the guy asked me, he says, well, you got a company name? And I said, well, why do you ask me that? He says, well, it's a big difference between shipping it with a company name and you shipping it privately, about like 3 or 4 times more cost for me to ship. Well, I said, I can make up a name pretty quick, so that's what came out, 5R Enterprises. And so we've still used it since, but it's never been registered. Actually, they did check on me because of something I did once, whether there was income, whether it was 5% tax collection.
Oh, okay. In that little, you mentioned the Cross Canada tour, and can you relate some crazy stuff that happened on that tour, or?
Oh yeah, there's a whole story.
Okay. What was it? One of the funniest ones, maybe? Not a tragedy, but.
Well, I guess the funniest was well, from Victoria here on that tour, there were 4 Model A's. And and just 2 couples of us are still alive today, but one of the couples passed away, Jack Little. He just restored this little 28 Model A and got it on the road. And everywhere from the time we got off the ferry until we finally figured it out, we was sort of hanging behind because we were a little slower than everybody with the truck. And so we finally found a bird's nest in his gas tank. That was a problem. So we got that cleaned up, and then after that, he smooth sailing the rest of the way. And he was at that time the president of the Victoria Car Club. And so when we get back from that, the Vintage Car Club Victoria at that time used to have a mileage award for everybody. So I applied for it. And he said, "Oh, his tours don't count." So, but his wife took the photograph of our truck and presented it to us at their annual awards banquet, and we were the family of the year. Family of the year.
The hat you mentioned earlier, was that got to do with the tour?
This is involved, this hat, with, we had all sorts of sponsors sponsoring us across. Ackland's van went with us with all sorts of equipment to repair cars as we went, and we had Red Ram Oil and several other outfits, but Turbo Gas, we used their tickets up. We got just past Winnipeg. Wow. With free gas. Free gas. Today that would be a real godsend with the price over there.
Oh, wow. So if involved with that was with the cross country, how this game is mind blowing. How did that evolve? I mean, Yeah, can you give us
It
a...
came when we got back, and that's another whole story. My kids and my 3 boys, and I think all 3 of them were playing. We were playing out at Oak Bay Rec Center. It was a nicer place to sit. You can sit up in the lounge. I designed that game, waiting for the kids to finish their 5 o'clock practices in the morning for hockey. And so we drive from where we live in Broadmead at the time. We go all the way to Oak Bay, and so the kids were in hockey, and so I designed this game, and this is my...
You could buy it too, by the way.
Well, I've got a few left, but not many. That board itself, the center, not the black part, but the rest of it is on a vinyl kind of stuff, and we searched with whether we fold it like games and so on. A guy from Fleming Printing came up with this concept. We'll print it, that board just rolls up. That whole piece goes in that tube. Somewhere, where's the tube? Over here. And all the game pieces and so on are in the tube. So it's a cross-counter game in the tube. And so those are places we stopped at. And it's all based on what we would do on the tours. There were either hotels, or there's tours, or there were meals across Canada. And those places were the stops. And that one little board that folds up, to get that bought and printed was $30 each for all those games, and I built 60 of them.
Yeah, so getting that to a game, was that more or less part of a bucket list for you?
Well, yeah, it was. And then my youngest son, Robin, his wife's a graphic artist out of town here, but now they live in Coombs, and she still works out of her house for a company out in Colwood area, Souk. And so she did all the final graphics on that. And it's amazing graphics on that thing.
If any of you have ridden in a Model A or driven one, you know it's not the most pleasant thing to be on I-5 driving this. But I'll relate a story of 1994. It was Model A's galore in '94, and we had a meet in Tacoma. And Harvey was on this trip. And we got, one of the tours we went on was up Crystal Mountain. And we drove up Crystal Mountain, no problem, and then the chairlift. Well, there was this couple, they were scared spinny to go on this chairlift. And they sort of befriended us, and they said, "We'll go up if you'll go with us." So we went up, got to the top, and we were doing different things. They came over and said, "Can we go down with you again?" This couple had just driven their Model A from the eastern seaboard to Tacoma, and they were going to drive it back, but were scared to go up a chairlift.
That was great. Jack Mather summed that up a few years ago. He said basically, and I'm going to ask you guys this, it's the greatest place in the world, Jack said, to grow up in because of the people. In our group here, the people, there's people have organizations similar to this, but not quite. They're not still here. When you look around, we're still here. We go to school at Royal Oak, we did this, we go here, we come back. And I don't know of any other place, and I think you guys can emphasize that too.
I could say not only did we live in the best place, but I think we lived in the best times.
Good guys, nice job.